Now, basically, in dynamics, a legal entity, we have talked about the essence of that. Now, the number sequence is used basically, and okay, again, it's tied to your legal entity. But the number sequence is used to generate what we call unique IDs for records in the system. Now, just imagine if you go and procure anything over the counter in any supermarket, that piece of paper they give you has a number that tracks those invoices. If you check where there's a number, and that is the essence of numbering. I'm just trying to explain it as simple as possible. Even when you transact with, you know, when you do online transactions, all those invoices, everything has a number that tracks that document. So the essence of number sequence is to generate that unique ID for those transactions in the system. So for example, vendors will have codes, customers will have their codes, items will have numbers. So the way we track transactions and documents in Dynamics is through the number sequence so that things don't get messed up and missing. So if I post a transaction, it will generate a number. If I want to go back to that transaction, I can always call out that number. And of course, it's also very important for audit purposes. And then again, if we look at it, number sequence have two types. One is the automatic generation of number sequence. So since number sequence is a number that is in the system, the first option is we can generate that number automatically and let that number be tied to all the documents we have in our system. Or the other option is to do it manually. But of course, best practice will say that you should use system generated invoices. So by automatic invoices, system automatically generates the next number, no user input required, ensure uniqueness and consistency. That's why it's very, very important that we use number sequences, automatic number sequences. For the manual number sequence, the users enter the number manually, system validates the number, and the number is saved if it's valid and unique. That's a lot of work. So you can see, example is the system will have V0045, but a user can put V-AB-01. So it's a lot of work when you do that manually. And of course, we have seen the key configuration for number sequence. One is, we have to now determine if it's company shared, if it's company specific, or it's a shared number sequence. I've talked about those two when we talked about the concept of data. We're going to see that even when we do number sequence, again, we have continuous and non-continuous numbers. For continuous numbers, no gaps, required for compliance, so that if you're raising invoices, they follow that sequence. But for non-compliance, you're going to have gaps are allowed for those kind of number sequences, and sometimes it helps with better performance. Again, when we're setting up number ranges, we have those two options, but it's important that all our documents, all our transactions, all our master data, transactional data are tracked by a unique number. It's very, very important. Now, the question is, again, if we look at the future between both of them, number entry is system generated, the other one is user centered, speed is faster, this is slower, errors is minimal, errors here is possible, control, this is low, this is very high, and then use case, standard transactions, sometimes manually is used for custom business needs. So that's why people can choose to use the manual option. But standard process and best practices use the automated invoice. So how do we go back to the system? How do we now generate a number sequence so that when we do transactions, we don't have to be manually entering those numbers? Still, we have to go back to the organization. We need to go back to, then as part of the structure, we're going to see number sequence here. So we select number sequence and we go to number sequence. Then already in GMUK, you can see that some numbers are already available. This is an example of a shared data. So number sequence and is shared data. I can access this because this data is shared. However, we need to generate one for our use. Can because it's still manual if we have to use this. So for you to generate numbers for your core documents and transactions, we have two options here. Number sequence, this is for manual, and this is to generate a unique one. If you use manual, for example, you're now going to be defining this sequence based on certain parameters. For example, if you say the number range I want to do is 00DF001 and the name is for PO numbers, don't expect you to do this anyway. Here you can define the scope parameter. Is it shared? By shared we mean will every other company be using this number sequence, or is it company code, company specific, or legal entity specific? So we can say company, and then it brings out the segment tables. So remember how we saw an example of a shared where you have V-AB-01. That's where you can design it here. So you select the company you want this to apply to. It's basically our G, right? Yeah, GMUK. And then you can now, you see, the sequence is G, company GUK. You see GUK here. Then there's a dash. See the dash here. And then the alphanumeric is 9 digits. So if I save this, it means that whenever this number is used, it's going to follow this format. And then I have to tell the system whether this is manually generated or continuous, and what's the smallest number, what is the next number, and then for performance sake, we have to leave this as reallocation is no, let it allocate manually. So these are the options we have. If this is manual, we have to set this to manual, and then the system does what it needs to do. If it's not manual, then it will be continuous, so that it will give us the next number automatically. And then if we are using it, we have to also indicate that it's, we make sure it's for use. So this is again how to generate create manual numbers. Sometimes it's used for specific for unique business cases. But for this class, we're going to use the generate option, which is for automatically generate number sequences for our business, for our documents. So you click on generate. It depends on the speed of your server and your internet. It might take some time. It might not take some time. It just depends on what's happening on your side. So just give it some time. Let's see how far it goes. Then we can move. Okay. Yesterday night it was fairly okay, but it will take some time. If it takes too much time, then we'll just proceed to the next thing, and then hopefully see what we can do. So while we wait for this, let's look for the next. Okay, I think it has come. All right. So once it's done, you're going to see this page. So it's already tell you GUK is already associated with a company. It's fine. Just ignore that. Also, it's also giving you some. This another message. This is not. It's just for information sake. When you see the blue one, then click on. It has told you welcome. You read about the wizard. This wizard helps you create required number sequence in your application setup. Blah blah blah. Click on next. So it will take you to the setup. Now, this is exactly what the number will look like in terms of format. And these are the areas that it's going to be. Imagine you providing manual numbers for all these areas. That's a lot of work. So these are the core modules that, all the modules in finance that need numbers. These are the reference. So for customer, vendor account, one-time supplier, these are all the transactions, and these are the number sequence that's been allocated automatically to them. These are the smallest. This is the range of numbers for each of these sequence. Um, Then if you want it to be continuous, means that, remember when we say continuous, it means that no gaps required for compliance. Non-continuous mean gaps are allowed, so you can tick on this to be continuous, and you can tick on some to be non-continuous. But I like leaving gaps because we are using a demo system. And you can remove the format. You can include scope. For example, this is the format. You can remove it and put what you want. You can include a scope in your format. But I think this is fine. I don't want to change the format. I like that it will come with GUK and then the next numbers depending on the number range. So for me, this is okay. Um, there's also PCS. So it's copying all these numbers from all the legal entities that have been provided. So if you are done with this, just click on next. It will tell you the number per module. So accounts payable has 58, accounts receivable 52, just like that. So these are all the core nodules and the number ranges that have been assigned to them in the system before we even start. Remember to make sure your company code is here, your legal entity is here. When you're doing that, you click on finish. It will also take some time to finish running. So again, that's the second most important activity that needs to happen. Okay, so it's saved and we are good to go. We've done that. Now, once you have defined your number sequence, we'll now move closely into processes. There are still some things to do here. If you go to organization, for example, you can also create operating units. They're already, if you check, they're already created. You can see admin, you can see IT. So if you want to create new, you can just create your own operating unit. For example, here we have operating units here. Let me see what we have. Now you can just align. Yeah, we have operations, finance, and sales. That's our business unit vis-a-vis operating unit. Then you can, so if you say new, for example, you can select what you want to create, whether it's a cost center, a value stream, a business unit. I don't know. So let's say these are business units. Then you just put the name of the business unit. So I can say GU GUK, which is dash, I say sales. Then business unit number, whatever that means, can put, it's alphanumeric, so I can put the GUK SAL1. Then the operating unit type is business unit. Then you can put a memo, put an address. Business unit is an extension of the business that can incur expenses and revenue. And then you click on save. So if you want to check, you see it's part of the list. So you create all the business units and that is done. You can also check organizational hierarchies if that is set up. So you see how it's defined, the departments, the central piece. So again, you can create your own hierarchy, in terms of how you want the setup to be. This one by default we can't change. These are graded out. But I think business unit is just fine. So once you're done with this, but the basic thing is what we have done. Other things we'll pick up from other modules. For the want of time, we'll just introduce. The next thing now is to start picking what we call the general ledgers, to start looking at processes. Yeah. So once we're done with this and do our right and number sequence, we go to the big one, which is the GL. I'll leave this class for next weekend because this is the foundation of dynamics and finance and operations. And it is important we understand it and we don't rush through it. By GL, it's tied to part of the organizational setup, but